So at the end of this video, I'm going to have new, bigger boobs. Now, I start this video off with that because, one, it's an extremely sexy hook and will probably get many of you to stick around if you haven't already skipped ahead a bunch to go see. But for those of you who are new to this channel, first off, welcome. This is a channel where we use geek culture and mainly Star Trek to talk about social and political issues. And second off, I'm transgender. I know, a trans person on YouTube? I think there are more trans people on YouTube than the actual world. I recently came to the decision to pursue breast augmentation surgery, as well as facial feminization surgery. And I came to that decision in a way that might be surprising to some of you and is kind of different than a lot of people think about the trans journey. Because, you know, I'm a unique sunflower. But as someone who loves to teach about trans issues and embrace the messy weirdness of it, because trans issues are complicated and weird and hard to understand, even for trans people, it's hard for us to get it, so it's really sometimes difficult for us to articulate it to other people. And I think you can't really do that without talking about the emotional, difficult, hard stuff that goes into it. And so I wanted to take this video as a chance to discuss some of my journey and some of the emotions and harder times that I went through to sort of understand who I am as a trans person. And then because it's me, talk about those feelings and issues through Star Trek for two main reasons. The first reason being Star Trek was a way as a kid that I was able to find an outlet for these emotions. Like, there were aliens and ideas and concepts in Star Trek that really helped me understand my transness and gave me a voice, a way to think about them in a way that I hadn't thought about before. And so Star Trek is inexorably tied to my journey as a trans person. And then also use Star Trek to explain them to you, because sometimes relating things in a more allegorical way through geek culture and things like that can help others understand, like, oh, I get that feeling now. I understand what you're trying to say. So maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but it'll kind of be fun to see how this sort of weird mishmash of my own life, my emotions, and Star Trek all relate to each other. And also, last thing I should say, just as a little warning before we actually start diving into this video, is because this is my journey and I'm going to be discussing these things, this video will be discussing some harder topics like depression, suicide, as well as some, discussion of genitals and, some things that might be considered sexually explicit. I'm not going to get talking about sex acts or anything like that, but we will be talking about bodies and my body in particular and specifically. And so just be aware of that and just know that that's where this video is going to go at some points. So with all of that in mind, I hope you'll join me as we discuss my gender transition and why I wanted to get breast augmentation and facial feminization surgery through Star Trek. I think when we talk about Star Trek and transgender issues, the character that everyone is always going to bring up is Dax. And I mean, with Jadzia being a woman who used to have the body and memories of a man, there's a lot of ideas and representation that you can find there. And certainly for me, Jadzia Dax was one of the most important representations that I was able to find as a kid in a world that didn't have a lot of transgender representation. But I've already talked about Jadzia Dax numerous ways when relating to trans issues. I did it in a video that should be up here or up here, so check that out if you want to hear more of my thoughts on that and how I related to her. But I want to go a very, very different route and talk about transgender issues not through Jadzia Dax, but Ezri Dax. I know, I'm getting wild and crazy up in here. Ezri Dax? No one talks about her. Ezri was a character who was forced by her situation to take on the Dax symbiote, as Dax would have died otherwise. She didn't choose to be Dax like Jadzia did. But by taking the symbiote, she was suddenly able to have 8 lifetimes of memories thrust on her that didn't feel like her own. Suddenly she didn't know who she was, didn't have any connection to herself. And for me, that's something that I can really resonate with. Typically, we think of a trans woman who wants to get surgeries follows a basic narrative. That there's facial feminization surgery, breast augmentation, vaginoplasty, which is what we know as like sex change or gender confirmation surgery, basically, removing the penis and getting a vagina, or, changing the penis into a vagina, which is a much more accurate way of describing that surgery. But all of these surgeries are intended to serve the purpose of alleviating gender dysphoria, which is the discomfort that a trans person feels between their body and their gender identity. Basically, you're sort of feel that your body isn't necessarily matching with how you view it in your head. And because I started to learn that my gender identity was a woman as a kid, it caused me distress, anxiety, and a lot of other mental health issues. Having a vaginoplasty, which I had several years ago, to get a vagina helped alleviate and end those mental stresses. That narrative isn't the case for all trans people. Some don't experience any body dysphoria at all and don't wish to change their bodies. But for me, like I said, I had a vaginoplasty for that exact reason, because of gender dysphoria. I had a penis, and while I certainly wasn't like, "Oh my god, I hate my penis, let's destroy it like the Death Star laser." You know, during puberty and that time of your life where you're supposed to have like excitement or intrigue or interest in that part of your body, I just didn't care. Puberty can be a really difficult time for any teenager, but for me, I was just sort of like, I feel no connection to this. I feel no connection to any of it. I'm not excited or horrified or terrified of it or any of the feelings that we're supposed to feel. I just didn't care. And all this started to cause me to see sex and my body as something that I didn't care about or want to participate in. And it led me to just not caring about myself or my body at all before coming out as transgender. In the year 2014, this may shock you, but I weighed over 300 pounds. I didn't go to the gym at all, and I lived mostly eating off of Hot Pockets or entire oven pizzas every night. I even had a neck beard, which is like, you know, the telltale sign that you really don't care about yourself is when you have just a neck beard. I just didn't feel like my body was worth taking care of. I felt that it didn't matter. Yet, the same thing also was happening with my mind as well. It wasn't just my body. I felt like I wasn't living a life that I felt fulfilled by. And so I lived for other people, giving pretty much all of my time and energy to take care of others. I had a girlfriend at the time who I would spend all day doing what she wanted me to do. I would look over her schoolwork, I would ignore events that I wanted to go to, or even my friends, because, you know, she wanted me to do something for her. And I honestly felt okay with that, because my life wasn't worth much, so why not give her what I could? And that's not her fault. You know, she was only taking what I was willing to give, and I never set any boundaries for her. But my life started to deteriorate. It wasn't just her. I did this with every part of my life. I felt like you're supposed to give your life for others. That's what being a good person is. But it took something away from me. It took away my health, my mental stability. It sent me into a depression. I never actively tried to kill myself, but I thought about it a lot. You know, I would always say to myself under my breath, like, I just want to kill myself. You know, wherever I was just walking. It would just be a repeated refrain to the point where I didn't even really think about it. It was just something I said to myself as I was walking around. I even sometimes say it nowadays, more jokingly and less seriously, but like it's just become a mental tick up here. And so all of that was part of why coming out as trans was so difficult for me. I mean, yeah, there was this fear of like, you know, any trans person coming out would have like, oh, I'm afraid that coming out is, you know, going to ruin my life, or someone's going to hate me, or there's going to be bigotry or anything like that, or my family won't accept me. But also coming out meant that I had to do something for myself for once. And why should I do something for myself when I just desperately hated who I was? Sure, coming out as trans might make me more like myself, but what if it didn't? And all that time and effort that I spent trying to transition and learn more about myself, that was just time that I could have given to someone else. And why waste all that time on this stupid bit of flesh that I just don't care about? So I knew there was a version of myself in my head that I just really wanted to connect with, and I just couldn't. You know, I explored it when I was younger by trying on women's clothing, and I felt so excited by that, so empowered by that. But I just couldn't tell anybody. I couldn't live every day in that life, and so I just didn't care anything about myself, and I just kept building and building throughout my life. And then I hit college, and college was this time where everyone was just exploring who they were, both sexually and getting independence from their parents and their family. And I saw all my friends coming into their own as themselves, as who they wanted to be. You know, we weren't all there yet. No one knows themselves even when they finish college, but you're starting to understand who you are separate from everybody else. And I couldn't explore myself in the way that I wanted to, and I just kept getting so angry about it. I just remember one night that I was just so angry and upset that I got in my car from college campus and drove down to Walmart. and walked around the women's clothing section and knew that, I lived in a fairly liberal town. No one's going to judge me. I could just buy women's clothing and wear it. Or I could just, hell, if I was too scared, I could just, go into a changing room and try something on. Just express myself a little bit. I couldn't even do that. I couldn't even walk into the women's clothing section. I just was walking around the border of it so angry at myself. And realizing that this is who I wanted to be, and I just couldn't even enter that space. And I just hated myself. I hated myself for that. And like I said, it just led to spiraling depression and hating myself more and more and more. And I realized that I needed to make a change. I needed to either say something or I was going to hurt myself. So I was very lucky that I had 2 close friends that were bisexual, who were, out bisexual, like the first LGBTQ friends that I had ever known, closely and personally. I mean, I knew other queer people before I had come out or before I knew them, but these are the first 2 that were close friends to me. And I came out to them. And it was one of the best things that I had ever felt. As I started to explore my transgender identity, I started to feel more of that connection to myself. It wasn't overnight. There was a lot of depression and anxiety between coming out and figuring out what that even meant, and starting hormones and figuring out how I wanted to exist in the world as Jesse, and, going to the gym and things like that. It was a lot of work. And, I even asked one of the 2 close friends that I told you about that I came out to. I was even so depressed and was dealing with so much stuff at the time. It was so hard that I even ostracized her. I, got too toxic that she said, I can't be here for you. You need to be on your own. And that just hurt me so much. Eventually, I started to figure out who I wanted to be. I started watching what I ate. I started wearing women's clothing, going by Jessie in the world, and started using she, her pronouns. And that felt more comfortable. And I started to like the life that I had, even though things weren't perfect. I should say I liked who I was more, not necessarily the life that I had. And one of the things that I was actually surprised to learn was that I was actually better able to help and fight for others because I was helping myself. The fact that I'm in a better headspace now lets me talk to you on this channel. To have the ability to sit and write a script and perform in front of the camera. Before this, I would hate to have been on camera because I just didn't like what I was and what I looked like. I learned, and am still learning to a degree, that there's not just a balance between selfishness and selflessness, but a direct tie between them. Similarly, on Star Trek, Ezri doesn't have a connection to her own self, her own sense of identity. And that lack of identity followed her throughout her entire season that she was on the show. Her entire arc was about finding a connection to reorient herself in a new way. And one way she did this was by latching on to something that she knew felt right, and that was going to Deep Space Nine. To surround herself with people who knew her in a previous life, and who she knew would understand her identity as Dax, but also accept her differences as Ezri. And strangely, in a weird way, that's what it felt like coming out as transgender. Because I didn't want to destroy who I was to eliminate myself, but I wanted to reorient myself in a way that merged old me with new me, to be able to connect with who I was now, who I saw myself in my head. I liked this person here, and I just wish they were here. But there was more to it than just living as a woman. For example, the changelings in Deep Space Nine talk about how when they transform into something, they start to understand it more, to take on aspects of it. That by becoming and embodying something, you start to feel a deeper connection to yourself in that form. So for me, like the changelings, where becoming something makes you feel more connection to it, I knew in my head that by getting a chance to live as a woman, to have a body that I connected with by getting gender confirmation surgery, vaginoplasty, that I would be able to become more connected with myself, to become more me. I knew that getting a vagina would actually make me feel excitement in my life, that it would actually make me feel excited about how my body could interact with myself and the world and with a sexual partner and with my own mind, just my own comfortability here. And actually find that connection to myself. as well as just make me feel comfortable as I walked around the world. I mean, for example, there's nothing that excites a post-op trans woman more than wearing like gym clothing for the first time after surgery. Getting to wear like skin-tight clothing down there without having to worry about anything unexpectedly showing off as you're trying to run for 5 miles on a treadmill, that just feels comforting. And I know that's like kind of a weird thing to talk about, but it's like, it's such a moment to like wear gym clothes after a surgery. To just feel like you can wear the clothing that you want and not feel like there's something that's going to betray you. And before surgery, it's frustrating to know that there's a whole part of yourself that you can't explore, but you know is there because you don't fit in your body. So I go and get the vaginoplasty and I felt amazing. Like I can actually connect with a part of myself that I never knew existed and care about myself in a way that I never cared about myself. It's about finding a way to live your life that feels encouraging, that feels like it fits you. But here's the thing. After all that stuff that I just described to you back then, I didn't want to get breast augmentation and facial feminization surgery. But why was that the case? Why would I want to go through vaginoplasty and not get, breast augmentation or facial feminization surgery? Things that made me look more feminine and made me connect with being a woman more. Well, other than myself and my doctors and my sexual partners, few people are ever going to see my vagina. But when it comes to breasts and your face, I worried that by pursuing something like that, by getting breast augmentation or FFS, wouldn't be about me alleviating gender dysphoria, about alleviating that discomfort with my body, but about trying to conform to some arbitrary beauty standards determined by society. In the episode Mud's Women, we find 3 different women who use a drug in order to make themselves beautiful. They feel that without the drug, they are gross or ugly or disgusting. In that episode, Kirk gives one of the women a drug that she thinks is the thing that will make her beautiful, but turns out to be a placebo. Yet she still becomes beautiful, proving that your beauty is inside you, not given to you by a drug. Cisgender women, or women who are not trans, who are raised as women from their birth, are given an overriding message to be beautiful, to have nice faces, or wear makeup, or to think about their breast size from the day they were born. And we do similar things to men as well, like saying you need to be big, strong, and emotionless to be attractive. I learned the male ones. I picked those up when I was younger. And since coming out as trans, I've learned some of the beauty standards that society has told us. Like, I get really upset if I, have acne or I don't look as nice one day, when that was something like when I was a guy, I could have cared less about. But I've picked up, and even as an adult, they've kind of become ingrained in my psyche because that's what we tell women to be. But I'm someone who supports anyone looking any way that they want to. All of us have our own beauty regardless of how beauty is defined as society. We don't have to have big boobs or little boobs or any boobs to be attractive. You don't have to wear makeup to be attractive. You don't have to be, dainty to be attractive. Same thing for men. You don't have to be some strong muscle-bound guy or Tom Hardy to be attractive. Though being Tom Hardy does help in my case. In the episode Profit and Lace, Quark gets a sex change to become a woman in order to trick a Ferengi into giving women rights. Yes, that's an episode that exists, and it goes exactly as you expect it does. Now, this episode has a lot of problems, but it's actually not one of the most offensive things ever. Just more of a missed opportunity to talk about really intriguing things. But that's for another video. But when Quark initially transitions to a woman, though, she, Quark, initially tries to start to learn how to be a woman. She starts to find ways to perform what she sees as tells of being a girl. She tries to learn to walk like a woman. She tries to learn to talk like a woman. She even gets hormonal rage and gets all confused by those complicated numbers.
All these facts, figures, they're too much for me to remember.
In short, she tries to become her own stereotypical view of a woman. So going back to me, by pursuing breast augmentation or FFS, I worried that I was feeding into that narrative that Quark seemed to fit into. This idea that by pursuing these beauty standards, by trying to be more of a woman, quote unquote, I was just making a stereotype of myself. I mean, that's what many TERFs, trans-exclusionary radical feminists, argue that trans women do, that they just reinforce gender norms and thereby hurt women because we're reinforcing what it means to be a woman. That by trans women wanting to be more feminine, that somehow we're saying that this is all a woman can be, that we are trying to align with a societal arbiter of beauty. And that pursuit of that societal arbiter of beauty does happen to many trans people. You see, when many trans people come out, we tend to try to be the stereotype of our gender. because that's the only connection that we have in our brain for us to be. When I came out as a woman, I tried to validate that identity of a woman as much as I could, and the best way I felt I could do that was like wearing dresses or hyper feminine things. I mean, I literally learned how to do makeup from drag queens who are themselves performers of women. I was learning the performance of a woman without being myself. But as you grow and learn more about your identity, you start to find out what you are more. At the end of the episode Prophet and Lace, before Quark detransitions, she spends an entire conversation talking about Prophet with a man. She's not performing some version of womanhood like she was earlier when she pretended to not understand the facts and figures. There's no gender norms being placed on her, she's just being herself. What many people don't get about trans people is that trans women break gender norms all the time. I mean, we're just as diverse as any other women. Some are more feminine presenting, some are more masculine presenting. Some are in between or nowhere or anywhere they want to be on that spectrum or not on the spectrum at all. I mean, look at me right now. I'm like wearing, this is definitely a feminine outfit, but it's definitely more masculine presenting, with my hair like this and with the tattoo and all that stuff. Finding who we are takes time, especially when you're putting a whole new gender identity onto it. And so, yeah, our initial reaction is to become more feminine because that validates ourselves, but then we kind of find where we fit within that, kind of find how we wish to be ourselves within, I don't want to say our new identity, but an identity that we hadn't been able to present up until then. No young girl going through puberty or when they're a kid comes out of, the womb being like, I know exactly how I want to present in the world. Same thing happens for trans women, but we're just doing it at an older age because we're learning about ourselves at an older age. And for me, like I told you before, I found that I like playing with gender. I actually learned that I don't fully identify as a woman, but I identify as non-binary, which for me means neither fully man nor a woman, but something else. Non-binary may mean something else for someone else though, so don't take my definition as the only one. But I enjoy having a more masculine presentation at times, but other times I like wearing a dress and looking really feminine and beautiful. And I like having that flexible identity. And all of that was available to me without breast augmentation or FFS. So I didn't want to get breast augmentation and FFS because I felt like getting those things would feel like I was just trying to pursue this arbitrary version of what it means to be a woman. Reinforcing this idea that I was going to be a stereotype, and I didn't want to be a stereotype. I wanted to just be me. But here's the thing, and here's what gets complicated. As I started to learn more about myself and learn that I like to play with gender, that I don't like to be seen as just a woman or just a guy, I like being able to be flexible within my gender identity, I learned within that, though, that I like to be read as a woman more. Odo is a character who I always somewhat identified with. Odo is a person who never feels like he can fit in with solids. And one of the reasons for that is because he's never fully able to create a face that really replicates what it looks to be a humanoid. And as a result, Odo always feels on the outskirts of solid society, even though he looks mostly like a solid. So like Odo, when I go out into the world, I still have many bodily features that read to some as masculine, like the shape of my face or breasts that don't match my body frame, even after being on hormones. For example, when I wear more masculine presenting clothing and I decide not to wear makeup for the day, and I go out into the world, I go to a Starbucks or I go to work or go to things like that, sometimes I will get he, him, sirred. I'll be seen as a guy. And while I don't necessarily hate being seen as a guy from time to time, I don't like that, in my base form, in my base form, like it's Dragon Ball Z, but like in my base self, the base version, without doing a lot of work, I get read as a guy. And I get read as a guy, 70-80% of the time out in the world, even when I do a lot of work. And I started to realize that while I identified as non-binary, I was starting to identify more as a demigirl. My gender expression can be all over the map, but I generally tend to lean towards feminine. And I know that's really complicated, right? And I just realized that who I want to be is to be seen as a woman and then being able to play with my identity from there. To be able to be read as a woman and then be able to play with more masculine presentation from there. I like being seen as a woman who can be more masculine presenting. Being seen as a woman out in the world regularly makes me feel just more comfortable, makes me feel connected to myself, but also makes me feel sexy and attractive. You can feel that way as a guy, you can feel that way as anyone, but for me, just being read that way just makes me feel attractive. And I started to realize that, I kind of do want to have bigger breasts. I kind of do want to have a face that's read more feminine that would just make me feel sexier. It would make me feel like I could be more comfortable out in the world and not get read as a guy more often. It would just let me feel more like myself. Again, that connection with myself. So when I go out into the world, I'm, like I said, often read as a man. My gender identity isn't seen. It gets erased. That demigirl idea of myself just isn't seen by the world. And it starts to feel like I'm not living a life that feels mine anymore because it's not the life that feels right to me. I'm not being seen again. I'm not connecting with myself again. And this led me to start feeling that anxiety and depression again, to not care about myself as much. I again fell into that depression because again, I just didn't feel a connection with myself. I started to understand more about myself, but didn't feel a connection to it because I wasn't being seen. And again, I started taking less care of myself, to hate myself again, to cry all the time. It's a feeling that I'm all too familiar with. And I realized that I want to be seen by the world as a woman, to present more as a woman, to have that be the canvas of my body in order to then play from there. That getting breast augmentations and facial feminization surgery would not only allow me to present myself as a woman, but then also make me feel sexier, more confident, and then as that, aesthetic version of myself, then I could play with different aspects of gender that I didn't feel as confident playing with before the surgery. I could get my head shaved and have less long hair. I could wear more or less makeup as I wanted to. I wouldn't have to try to do these extra things to be read as a woman and then play from there as more of the amorphous gender identity that I wanted to have. Odo gradually came in to accept his distinction and difference from the world. In one episode after Odo becomes a solid, he gets surgically transformed into a Klingon for an episode, but then when they transform him back into his solid self, he remains looking like Odo, looking slightly off from humanoid. One could assume that if he got made a Klingon, he could be made to look like a fully fledged human, or Bajoran. But he chose to look the way he does, because that's what allowed him to express his identity in the way that he desired to be in the world, that he was a changeling regardless of if he was a solid now or after. He wanted to be seen that specific way out in the world. I want someone to see me and see a woman, and then from there, play with my gender presentation, wearing more masculine clothing, but the blank canvas of my body, where I want to start from playing, feels more feminine. Now, I know some transphobes out there are going to be like, well, that's just because you're trans, you're just mentally ill, and so you're always going to be depressed. Changing your body isn't going to fix your mental illness. But it's like, I know as I've gone through this transition, I have felt more confident with who I am. At every single stage, I have learned more about myself and become more confident and liked myself more. But as I also learn more about myself, I am also starting to understand deeper and deeper thoughts about myself and learning how I want to grow in my identity and how I want to express myself. And sometimes how I express myself is at odds with my body. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes I can, be like, all right, I'm going to try and change the way I dress. I'm going to take care of myself by going to the gym. And in some ways, it's like, I know that, being able to show off my body in this specific way by getting breast augmentation and FFS would be able to help me feel more comfortable. But that's some place that I can only get to with understanding in time. I had to go through each step of my transition, each step of my journey to learn these things. I had to go from like, oh, I feel disconnected from my body. I feel really depressed and anxious and upset about that. I want to get vaginoplasty. Get vaginoplasty. This feels right. This feels comfortable. Now I want to start being, more of a woman. What does that mean? I start to act more like a stereotypical woman and start acting more like what I thought a woman was in my head. But then I start to realize like, oh no, I can be more of a tomboy. I can play with gender and that feels more comfortable. And be like, well, I don't want to, if being a stereotype of a woman like I thought I wanted to be when I first came out wasn't what I wanted to be, maybe these ideas of breasts or FFS weren't something that I wanted either. Maybe that's something that feels like it's trying to fit into that stereotypical version of a woman that I ended up not wanting to be. But then as I explored more, I started to realize no, I wanted to have these aspects of my body changed so that I could feel more comfortable in then playing with gender from there. But all those things are steps along this journey that I had to get to in each spot. And yes, there's some frustration and depression and anger and, being upset during those times when you realize something's not quite right. But each step is an important step along that journey. That's what life is. Life is learning how to go along this journey and learn more about yourself and realize what you want to pursue, what you want to be, how you want to exist in the world. And that's what this whole process, what I've just tried to word vomit out to you, has been about, to try and explain some of the thought processes and steps in my head. And yeah, part of that is gender dysphoria, like I've been talking about, but also part of it is beauty dysphoria, or that, idea of how society wants women to look. I'm not going to sit here and claim that my wanting bigger breasts or face feminization surgery is only my gender dysphoria, because it's also based in how society wants women to look. But here's the thing, it's okay that it's both of them, because both beauty dysphoria and gender dysphoria are inexorably linked. They come from the same feeling of wanting the world to see you in a certain way and then able to connect with yourself in a certain way. I want to get bigger breasts because I want to feel sexy and attractive the same way a cisgender woman getting a breast augmentation wants to feel sexy and attractive. And yeah, there's layers to it because, I also was born a man. And so all of that led me to decide to get breast augmentation. At the time I'm recording this part of the video, my breast augmentation is 2 months away. And I'm going to cut in a second to me after the surgery. I can almost guarantee you that the me after that surgery, other than the pain of having gone through surgery, feels more confident in who she is. Feels more comfortable in her body. Maybe I'm wrong, and she'll tell you that in a few minutes. But she's the next step of who I want to be. And I'm excited to get to be her, and I'm excited for you to meet her. And I hope that you enjoyed me trying to explain that, and I hope that she's able to explain how she's feeling to you, because that's what I'm going to cut to. I just want her to explain what she's feeling about her breasts right now and about her body right now, and if she feels more confident. And I really think she is. And like I said, I'm just excited about that. So, all right, we're going to take it away and let future me talk to you about her new boobs. Well, thanks, previous me, for really building this up. But yeah, hi, this is me post-surgery. I mean, I know a few of you have probably already seen me a few times in the videos that I've put up the past couple weeks, but this is my first official video post-surgery where I talk about my brand new assets here. But yeah, I mean, I sort of set up talking about the big emotional stuff with all this earlier in the video, and I'm gonna get to that in a second, but obviously, this has just been the first 2 weeks of being post-surgery, of having new parts of my body. So a lot of it has just been like healing and a lot of pain and a lot of like hard time moving around. And then on top of that, dealing with all this crazy stuff going on in the world right now at the moment, which if you're watching this in the future, months from now, hopefully the world has gone back to some version of normal. But obviously between everything, it's been kind of a crazy few weeks. But, one of the things that surprised me when I look at my body right now, when I look at all the the misshapen stuff, because it's a lot of healing from surgeries, things are swollen and moved around, and I'm kind of in pain, able to barely walk for a few days there. There have been a few moments when I've kind of taken off some of the bandages and about to step into the shower, and I catch myself in the mirror and I see my new, breasts, and I see my new body and how it's changed right now. I just feel more comfortable. I don't know. There was a moment the other night where I just was about to step in the shower and I just looked at myself in the mirror and I just stared for 10 whole minutes. Just literally 10 whole minutes just looking at myself. Not just the breast, but my more hourglass shape, my skinnier body. I mean, look, this is a picture I'll put up right here of what I used to look like. And then look at me now. And look at how much I've changed, and just seeing that juxtaposition in my mind of I still have a small reticence of looking in the mirror. I don't always look at myself without judgment. But to be able to look in the mirror and just not judge, but just appreciate my body for 10 whole minutes, to just enjoy looking at myself, not in a sexual way, but just, oh, this is me now. This is how I exist. And still having this mental image in my brain of myself, how I used to be. Sometimes I still see myself that way in my head. It's still my image of myself as I walk about the world. I still see myself as that sort of bigger person, more masculine person. And then to just look in the mirror and just have that challenged in such a direct way, oh, I'm moving my hand. That's me. It's a weird feeling. And it's a good feeling. But it's really surreal. And having breasts, like bigger breasts, I guess I should say, has added to that feeling of that surreal, beautiful, wonderful feeling that it just makes me feel good to know that. And like, in all honesty, like looking at myself in the, like I did a few test shots before I shot this part. I was just looking at my images, like, I haven't changed, like, yeah, certainly these fun bags are a lot bigger. I'm enjoying, like, playing with them. But I don't look all that different from how I looked before. But I feel different. I feel more confident, and I know that that's only going to increase the more I get to heal. And when I'm, like, really excited once all this world craziness dies down and I can actually go outside and just feel the confidence in my body. It's not like I'm gonna be like, yeah, let's show off my boobs to everybody and like wear like really low plunging stuff. I might do that because, you know, I want to have a little bit of fun with them. But the biggest change isn't gonna be like, look at off my boobs. It's just gonna be this new sense of confidence that I'm feeling. Like I don't know. I've had growing confidence ever since I came out, but I feel even more so now. And that's just, I don't know. It's just really cool. So I'm just, you know, as much as like I'm still healing and there's still some pain, I'm very pleased with my choice and I'm very happy with where I'm at, truly and honestly. Not just saying that for the camera. I feel really good about this surgery and I feel really good about this choice. You know, there was still a little bit of like questioning as when I went into the surgery the day out. I was like, is this the right thing? Is this what I wanted? And I'm just glad to feel now that that's confirmed that this was the right thing for me to do. It was the smart choice. It will make me happier. It will make me more confident. It will make me a better person. And, you know, I filmed the earlier segment of this video. I'll sort of wrap this up, but I filmed the earlier segment of this video before all the stuff with the scammers that happened a few weeks ago, and go check out some of my videos if you don't know what that is. But this was only possible now because of all of you out there in my audience. This surgery and this new sense of confidence and this new comfortability with who I am in my own body. It's only possible because of the kindness of my audience. A lot of people that I've never met in real life, and so, as weird as it is to say, my boobs are in part thanks to you, and I'm entirely grateful for that. It truly means the world to me. So thank you for everything and for changing my life. It really means the world to me. Alright, well that's it for this video. I hope that it was educational. I hope it helped you learn a little bit more. I hope it was a lot of fun, and I hope it was also like, you know, it got a little bit dark there at certain points, but I hope it was at least educational for where I'm coming from and sort of my mental state, and also just teaching about what it means to be trans and what it means to want to get these types of gender confirmation surgeries. So if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, I'd love to read them down in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, or more importantly, if you want to help me pay off the surgeries, because there's still a lot of like payments that I'm going to be making for these surgeries for the next few years. If you want to help me possibly do this full time, do more videos like this full time instead of doing like I have a day job, it would really mean a lot to me if you could support me over on Patreon. That truly would mean so much if you could support me there. But regardless of if you subscribe or comment or give to my Patreon, I'm just so glad that you stopped by, and I hope that you learned something today and that you had some fun. And as always, I hope that you live long and prosper. And special thanks to my commander level and above Patrons: Eli Berg-Moss, Stephen Schuthart, Boyd and Mary Beth Earl, Michael McGee, Lal Lindley, Wellington Marcus, Inar Sigurdsson, Marika Kwiechin, Munir Amlani, Mari Nekar, and Polly Mina.